Welcome to our fourth phonetics video. So far, we have discussed a little bit about the field of phonetics with a focus on the subfield of articulatory phonetics. We've learned the IPA symbols, primarily those that correspond to English sounds, and how to talk about the place of articulation for consonants. In this video, we will talk about another way to describe the production of consonants, manner of articulation. So manner of articulation is the way in which the airstream is affected as we push air out from our lungs through the vocal tract. So the first and most basic distinction is that of voicing. There are voiceless sounds, which are produced with the glottis open and the vocal cords lax so that they do not vibrate. Essentially, these are the speech sounds you make when you don't use your voice. Then there are voiced sounds, which are produced with the glottis closed so that the vocal cords do vibrate. These are the speech sounds you make where you do use your voice. For example, say the sounds s and z while touching your fingertips to your throat. You should be able to feel your throat vibrating when you say the z, but no vibration when you say the s. Now alternate between those two sounds without pausing, keeping your fingers on your throat. As you will notice, the only thing that changes as you move from pronunciation of the S sound to the Z sound is the vibration of your vocal cords. The S is a voiceless sound, while the Z is a voiced sound. You can further test the voicing difference between the sounds P and B in words like rope and robe, or the difference between the sounds F and V in words like fine and vine. Which ones are voiced and which ones are voiceless? A further phonetic distinction for voiceless sounds is aspiration. A consonant is considered aspirated if there is a puff of air following its release. If there's no puff of air following the release of the consonant, it is considered unaspirated. So you can test this by holding your hand in front of your mouth when you pronounce the words on the slide. So when you say pool, you should be able to feel a small puff of air immediately after the P. This is aspiration, and we transcribe it using a superscript H. The word spool, in contrast, does not have this aspiration following the P, so we do not put the superscript H in transcription. So try it with all three words, feeling for the puff of air. Pool, spool, tail, stale, kale, scale. In addition to voicing and aspiration, we can describe sounds as oral or nasal. An oral sound means that the air is passing only through the oral cavity, while for a nasal sound there is air also passing through the nasal cavity. In oral sounds, the velum is raised, closing off the passage between the nasal cavity and the throat so that air can't pass up through the nasal cavity. In nasal sounds, the velum is lowered, opening that passage so that the air can pass through the nose. Many of our English consonants are oral consonants like P, B, T, and D, to name a few. Nasal consonants include M, N, and N. If you hold a finger under your nose when you pronounce an M, for example, you can feel the very soft flow of air out of your nose, even while your lips are closed and no air is passing out of your mouth. Keep in mind, we are talking about airflow during the production of the consonants, not after it is released. Obviously, once we release the consonant and produce a vowel, then there's air flowing out of the mouth again. So far, we've discussed three main ways of classifying consonants: by voicing, by place of articulation, and now by nasalization. Thus, a P is a voiceless, bilabial, oral consonant, while a N is a voiced, alveolar, nasal consonant. But there's more. The next few slides examine further ways of classifying consonants depending on how much air passes through the oral cavity and in what way the air passes through the oral cavity. So the first two of these additional classifications are stops and fricatives. Stops are consonants in which the air is completely stopped in the oral cavity. Again, we are talking about the air being stopped during the production of the consonant itself, not after its release. So these are sounds like p, b, t, d, k, g, etc. Particularly for the voiceless stops, you can really feel that there is an absolute cessation of air and all sound while you are producing the consonant. You can't breathe or hold onto the consonant for very long. You have to release it after only a very short period of time. So, for example, try holding a T. How long can you hold it before you release into a vowel? Can you hear anything while you are producing this stop? Or do you only hear the sound after you release the consonant? So there's no sound during the production of a T, in large part because there's no airflow while you are producing it. You can only hear that you've made a T after you release it and the air is flowing again. So the air is completely stopped. Even for voiced stops like D, we run into the same problem. Although you can hear a little bit of sound due to the vocal cords vibrating in the beginning, there's only so long you can keep it up because the air you pushed through the vocal cords to make the vibration is being stopped in the oral cavity by the consonant. You can only make the stop closure for a short time before you have to release it. The nasal stops like M and N are a little bit different. They're still considered stops because there is a complete cessation of airflow in the oral cavity. There is still air flowing through the nasal cavity though, which is why we can hold these consonants for a much longer period of time. But they are stopped in the oral cavity, so they are still considered stops. We just say that they are nasal stops instead of oral stops. Fricatives are an entirely different class of sounds. The air is severely restricted in the oral cavity, although it does still flow, and they are called fricatives because the air is restricted in such a way as to cause friction. They are usually characterized by a sort of hissing sound in the air. So some English fricatives include f, v, th, the, s, z, sh, and zh, and also h. Right, that H sound. And then some non-English fricatives are made at the velar region, like ch and g. Those are the X symbol and the gamma symbol, respectively. Affricates are like a combination of a stop and a fricative. They start out with a stop closure in the oral cavity, but transition very quickly into a fricative. You can test that out by trying to say a word like chill very slowly. The initial affricate consonant starts out with a T sound, but moves into a sh sound very quickly. So, ch, ch, ch. Liquids are produced with some obstruction of the airflow in the oral cavity, but not enough to cause friction. The two liquids that we have are L and R. The L for an L is considered a lateral liquid because air passes over the sides of the tongue, while the R is considered a central liquid because air passes over the middle of the tongue. Glides are produced with the least obstruction of all the consonant types. They are a lot like vowels in many respects phonetically, but they do behave as consonants. The glides of English are the palatal glide y and the labiovelar glide w. The w is called labiovelar because we actually make constrictions both at the lips and at the velum when we produce this sound. Some varieties of English also have a voiceless labiovelar glide, which is the upside down W. This sounds kind of like a wh sound, and in these dialects is primarily used for WH words like which, what, where. So in this dialect would sound a little bit like which, what, where, sorry. I don't actually have this sound in my dialect of English, so when I try and produce it, it sounds a little exaggerated. But for some speakers, particularly older generations, it is as natural a part of their speech as a t or a b is to you and me. If we group liquids and glides together, they are called approximants. This is because for all of these sounds, the tongue only comes reasonably close to the roof of the mouth to form an obstruction, but not so close that it causes friction or a complete cessation of the air. A few other classifications are necessary for non-English sounds, like trills, flaps, and clicks. So trills refer to the sound in which there is a rapid vibration of the tongue against a particular place of articulation in the vocal tract, such that the tongue hits the roof of the mouth multiple times in rapid succession. The trilled R of Spanish is a good example of a trill, so r. And that is usually transcribed with a regular R. Our textbook actually uses the regular R to represent the central liquid as well, so that R, the English R, rather than the trill. But if you look at other phonetic texts, you will see this regular R, the regular right side up R, used for trills, and the upside down R used for the English R. If there's only one quick tap of the tongue against the roof of the mouth, it's called a tap or a flap, and the symbol that we use looks a lot like an R, but without the straight up and down line, just the curved hook part. We actually do use this sound for some words in English, like butter or ladder, where the tongue flaps very quickly for that middle consonant instead of forming a strong D sound. So butter, ladder. Clicks are produced in a very different way from all other consonant sounds we've discussed so far. Essentially, the tongue forms a pocket of air against the roof of the mouth at various places of articulation, which creates suction, and then it's released very quickly, causing a click-like sound. So we use the dental click, which is the click, to signal disapproval in English-speaking cultures, and some people who work with horses a lot will use the lateral click, which is a but neither of these sounds function as consonants in English, unlike other languages that do use these click sounds as consonants just like any other consonant. Okay, and there you have the manners of articulation for all our consonants. Now you should be able to read the IPA chart for place and manner of articulation, as well as identifying the symbol sounds. Thank you.